They weren't built for comfort, they weren't built to last. They were built to go fast, fast enough to scare Ford itself. In the 1960S, the Mustang evolved from a cute commuter coupe into a track-shredding street weapon. But out of hundreds of variants, dealer specials, and secret prototypes, only a few dared to push the boundaries of sanity and physics. This is the 5 fastest Mustangs of the 1960S, told through the hidden horsepower, forbidden builds, and factory lies that nearly erased them from history. The decade began with pony cars and ended with monsters. As Ford battled the big three on the streets, strip, and NASCAR ovals, a few Mustangs slipped through the cracks. These weren't just cars, they were outlaws on wheels. Some were so fast, they never made it to the showroom. Some never should have. Let's count them, not just by horsepower, but by their audacity. Top 1, 1969 Boss 429 Mustang, the street-legal NASCAR monster. It was never supposed to be a Mustang. The engine was too big, the body was too small, the mission far too insane. And yet, somehow, Ford pulled it off. What rolled out of Carcraft's garage in 1969 wasn't just a car. It was a middle finger to the Hemi, to NASCAR rules, and to common sense. It was the Boss 429 Mustang, the fastest, meanest, and most misunderstood Mustang Ford ever dared to build. But here's the twist. They didn't build it because they wanted to. They built it because they were forced to. Let's rewind to the NASCAR wars of the late 60s. Mopar's 426 Hemi was eating Ford alive. Race after race, oval after oval. Chrysler's fire-breathing V8S were dominating. So Ford cooked up a response. The Boss 429. A purpose-built, semi-hemispherical V8 designed to crush the Hemi on the superspeedways. There was just one problem. NASCAR required that engine to be offered in a production car. Ford's big sedans couldn't handle it. The Torino was too soft. So, in an act of mechanical madness, they decided to wedge it into the Mustang, a car never designed to handle an engine this massive. Enter Carcraft, Ford's off-the-books race shop in Brighton, Michigan. Their mission? Cut, weld, stretch, and bend reality until the Boss 429 fit. And somehow, they did. What they created wasn't just fast, it was feral. The Boss 429 engine, officially rated at 375 horsepower, was a lie. Real-world dynos put it at well over 500 horsepower. With torque so flat and endless, it felt like the car was being towed by a jet. To fit the engine, Carcraft had to redesign the entire front end. Shock towers were relocated. The battery was moved to the trunk. The inner fenders were reshaped. A massive functional scoop was added to feed the beast beneath. It came with a 4-speed top-loader manual, 3.91 traction lock rear end, and heavy-duty suspension. And it sounded like war, deep, thunderous, unfiltered, the kind of sound that made small children cover their ears and grown men grin uncontrollably. On the street, the Boss 429 could hit 60 mph in just over 5 seconds. Quarter mile, low 13S stock, and high 12S with minor tuning. It was raw, loud, brutally fast. But here's the part that makes it truly wild. Ford didn't care if you liked it. They didn't advertise it, they barely promoted it, because to them, the Boss 429 was just a means to an end, a box to check for NASCAR. Only 859 units were built in 1969. Every single one started life as a 428 Cobra jet Mach 1 shipped to Carcraft and reborn as a Boss. And it wasn't cheap. At over $4,800 in 1969, it was more expensive than a Shelby GT500. Most dealers didn't even know what to do with them. Some sat unsold for months. Others were snapped up by street racers who knew exactly what Ford had accidentally unleashed. Handling? Not great. The massive front weight made it plow through corners. Comfort? Forget it. The engine bay radiated heat like a furnace. AC wasn't even an option. But none of that mattered, because the Boss 429 wasn't about finesse, it was about pure domination. Today, surviving examples fetch over $300,000 at auction, especially the rare Wimbledon white and Raven black ones. But back then, it was a mystery, a car that didn't belong anywhere, and yet outran everything. And yet, what makes the Boss 429 legendary isn't just how fast it was, it's that it almost didn't happen at all. Emissions laws, insurance hikes, internal budget wars, all of it nearly killed the project before the first car rolled off the line. Ford didn't want to build it, they had to. And what came next? A Mustang that looked even more ordinary, but somehow managed to carry almost as much firepower. And a name that sounded like royalty. Top 2, 1968, Shelby GT500KR King of the Road. Shelby called it the King of the Road, and he wasn't joking. It wasn't just a Mustang with more power. It was a street-legal statement, one loud enough to drown out Corvettes, Camaros, and anyone else foolish enough to line up next to it. By 1968, Carroll Shelby was done playing games. Ford had just unleashed the 428 Cobra Jet V8, a brutal, torque-heavy monster that Ford modestly claimed made 335 horsepower. But everyone in the know understood the truth. This engine was pumping out well over 400 horsepower. Shelby didn't hesitate. He took the GT500, stuffed in the Cobra Jet, refined the drivetrain, and gave it a title that would strike fear on the streets and racetracks alike. GT500KR, King of the Road. It wasn't just a Mustang with a badge, it was a purpose-built bruiser. The KR featured reinforced suspension, staggered rear shocks, a robust C6 automatic, or top-loader, 4-speed manual, and a functional ram air hood scoop that channeled air straight into the beast's hungry throat. Outside, it was glamorous. Chrome trim, bold striping, fiberglass hood. Inside, it was decked out with wood accents, a roll bar, and a 140 mpf speedometer. But beneath that luxury, pure fury. Quarter mile, 13.5 seconds. 0 to 60, under 6 seconds. Not bad for a Mustang that weighed over 3,600 pounds. The KR was a wolf in luxury clothing. You could drive it to the country club, pick up groceries, and still leave 2 black stripes down Main Street on the way home. What made it so brilliant was the duality. It had the manners of a grand tourer and the guts of a drag racer. A /C, power brakes, even a stereo, it was all there. But once that big block V8 roared to life, it was game over for whoever pulled up beside it. Magazines were stunned, testers praised its refinement, but even more, its brutal mid-range power. It didn't feel like other muscle cars. It didn't shout, it growled. Only 1,053 fastbacks and 517 convertibles were produced, all in that single 1968 run. That rarity, it only added to its legend. Shelby's influence was unmistakable. While later models would be more Ford than Shelby, the GT500KR was Carroll's last true masterpiece before Ford reined things in. Today, pristine GT500KRs command top dollar, sometimes over $250,000 at auction. But in 1968, you could walk into a showroom and pick one up for around $4,500. For that price, you got a car that could humble big block Chevelles and 440 Mopars, all while keeping your shirt tucked in and your cigar lit. It was the Mustang at its absolute peak. Raw power, refined engineering, and unmistakable Shelby swagger. It was Shelby's ultimate street king, civilized enough for the country club, brutal enough for the drag strip. But here's the twist. Just a year earlier, you didn't need to spend big bucks or win a race to drive a Shelby. Because in 1966, Carroll Shelby made performance personal and shockingly public. Coming up next, the 1966 GT350H, the Hertz Rent-A-Racer that put race-ready Shelbys into the hands of weekend warriors, insurance agents, and thrill-seeking teenagers. And what happened next? Top 3 1969 Mustang Mach 1 428 Super Cobra Jet drag pack. Ford said it made 335 horsepower. Reality? Try 410, maybe more. But the story of the 1969 Mustang Mach 1 428 Super Cobra Jet wasn't just about numbers. It was about domination, on the street, on the strip, and in the garages of anyone who knew how to order the right boxes on the spec sheet. When you checked the right codes, R-code engine, Super Cobra jet upgrade, and the elusive drag pack, you weren't just getting another muscle car. You were getting a factory-built street racer with the heart of a full-blown drag machine. The SCJ 428 wasn't your average big block. With heavy-duty internals, stronger crank and rods, revised heads, and a beefed-up oil cooler, it was designed to survive brutal quarter-mile launches without breaking a sweat. And then came the drag pack. 4.3 rear gears, traction lock differential, staggered shocks, and more attitude than the law should allow. Add in the functional shaker hood scoop, aggressive styling, and Mach 1 badging, and you had the sleeper car's worst nightmare. Even the sound was intimidating. A deep, thunderous growl that turned heads and cleared lanes. The moment you fired it up, the car announced itself as something more than stock. On paper, 335 horsepower. But in reality, this beast was knocking on the door of 425 horsepower, possibly more in cold air, and with optimal tuning. The results? Quarter-mile times in the high 13 sack at over 103 mph, bone stock. With slicks and tuning, some owners reported low 13 sec or better. And here's the kicker. Unlike the Boss 429 or the Shelby KR, this wasn't a limited production special. This was a build-it-your-way beast, hiding in plain sight on Ford dealer lots. You didn't need to pay Shelby prices or call in Cara Craft. You just needed to know what you were looking for and be ready to hold on tight. Many buyers didn't even realize they were driving one of the fastest cars on the road. A subtle badge, a shaker hood, a quiet menace. The 1969 Mach 1 Super Cobra jet wasn't refined like a GT500KR. It wasn't exotic like a Boss 459, but what it had was brute force and accessibility. Tens of thousands of Mach 1S were sold in 1969, but only a fraction were equipped with the SCJ/drag pack combo. That made these particular builds rarer than they appeared, and deadlier than they looked. Magazine testers in the day often didn't get the drag pack versions, meaning the public had no idea how quick these cars really were. Street racers, however, figured it out fast. These Mach 1S became legends at midnight. Today, collectors are finally paying attention. Auction prices are climbing, especially for real R-code SCJ/drag pack cars, with matching numbers and build sheets. Survivors with original drivetrains are being hunted down by enthusiasts eager to own a piece of overlooked muscle car history. Even more remarkable, the SCJ Mach 1 was street-friendly, comfortable enough to daily drive, quiet enough until you provoked it. Its greatest legacy isn't at Barrett-Jackson. It's in the stories of blown stoplights, stunned challengers, and the unmistakable roar of a 428 at full tilt. It was the working man's street king, fast, ferocious, and just within reach. It was loud, mean, and built for war. But the Mustang's path to dominance didn't always start with brute force, because sometimes the most surprising muscle came wrapped in a rental contract. But rewind to the Mustang's origins, and the story begins not with big blocks, but with a small displacement racer that redefined performance. Top 4, 1966 Shelby GT350H, Rent-A-Racer. Imagine renting a car that could outrun Corvettes and terrorize drag strips for less than $20 a day. In 1966, Hertz launched a partnership with Carroll Shelby that defied all logic and every insurance manual in the country. The result? The Rent-A-Racer program, officially known as the GT300. These weren't watered-down showroom models. They were real-deal Shelbys, born from the same DNA as the GT350 track cars. Under the hood was the K-Code 289 Hypo V8, pushing 306 horsepower at a screaming 6,000 RPM. Many were equipped with 3-speed automatics, but a few slipped through with 4-speed manuals, and those became instant street legends. The black and gold paint scheme looked elegant enough for a wedding, but once you turned the key, it was all business. Lightweight, loud, and aggressive, the GT350H was a proper muscle car dressed in a tuxedo. Magazine testers praised its nimble handling and powerful acceleration, especially compared to the heavyweights dominating Detroit at the time. But this wasn't just a novelty, it was a loophole. Weekend warriors realized they could walk into a Hertz lot, rent a GT350H, drive it to the local drag strip and race it. Some didn't stop there. Anecdotes from the era tell of renters pulling engines for the weekend, swapping in built motors, then returning the car with the original block reinstalled, all before Monday morning. Others took it further, using the cars for full-on illegal street racing, only to return them with smoked tires, dented panels, and bent axles. Hertz tried to clamp down on the abuse by limiting rentals and inspecting returns more carefully, but the program was already famous, or infamous. Over 1,000 units were produced for Hertz, scattered across the country. Most came back, but not all. Some were totaled, others mysteriously vanished, and the ones that survived often bore battle scars from wild weekends. The numbers? Mid-14s in the quarter mile with a skilled driver and a top speed over 120 ms. But the real thrill wasn't in the stopwatch, it was in the story. Firing up a Shelby V8 with no commitment, no purchase, just pure, unfiltered horsepower on demand. The GT3H wasn't just fast, it was revolutionary. It broke the mold of what a rental car could be and helped cement the Mustang's image as a street machine accessible to anyone with a license and a weekend to burn. More importantly, it made the Shelby name legendary. Suddenly, even those who couldn't afford a race car could feel what one was like. Shelby had democratized performance, even if only temporarily, and inspired a generation of gearheads. Today, surviving GT350Hs are highly collectible. Those with Hertz provenance command serious money, especially the rare 4-speed variants. Original documentation, matching numbers, and preserved paint jobs send values soaring past 6 figures. But their true legacy lives in the myth that for just $17 a day, you could rent a race car, raise hell, and return it before the paperwork caught up. For one weekend, you weren't just a driver, you were a racer. But not all Mustangs needed Shelby magic to fly. Some came straight from the factory, overlooked, underrated, and ready to destroy the quarter mile with nothing but stock parts and suppressed specs. Top 5, 1965 Shelby GT350. It didn't need a massive engine to go fast, it just needed to be born on a racetrack. By 1965, Carroll Shelby had already built Cobras that tore up European circuits and humiliated Ferraris. But Ford had a new mission for him: transform their freshly minted Mustang into something brutal enough to win SCCA-B production races. Shelby didn't just accept the challenge, he reimagined the car from the asphalt up. What arrived wasn't just a tweaked pony car, it was the GT350, a track-born animal that roared like a Cobra but wore the clothes of a street machine. He started with the Mustang Fastback, ripped out the rear seats, upgraded the suspension, brakes, and chassis bracing, and tuned the 289 Hypo V8 to make 306 screaming horsepower. The exhaust was side exit. The paint was Wimbledon white with blue racing stripes. The sound, pure mechanical violence. There was no insulation, no power steering, no automatic transmission, just raw engagement. Every bolt had a purpose. Every corner demanded respect. It wasn't just a car, it was a test of nerve. You'd think the muscle car battles were won at the drag strip, but the GT350 was no quarter-mile brute. It was a corner carver, an American answer to Europe's finest. 0 to 60, around 5.8 seconds. Quarter mile, mid-14s. But that wasn't the point. What blew people away was how it dominated road courses, lapping heavier, more powerful cars like they were standing still. SCCA racing rules required at least 100 street-legal versions be sold to homologate the car for competition. Shelby built 562 of them, and they weren't Peugeots, they were nearly identical to the race-spec cars. On the street, they were loud, stiff, and unforgiving, but to the right driver, they were symphonies of precision and rage. Road and Track called it a racing car for the street. Car and Driver declared it the closest thing to a sports car ever offered by an American manufacturer. The GT350 didn't just change the Mustang's reputation, it changed everything. Before it, the Mustang was seen as a stylish car for secretaries and college kids. After it, the Mustang had credibility. Real, track-earned, tire-shredding credibility. Shelby's version became a blueprint for what performance Mustangs could be. Lighter, sharper, and surgically fast, the GT350 went on to win the 1965 SCCA B Production Championship the same year it debuted, and it didn't stop there. The GT350 would go on to influence not only future Mustangs, but American performance philosophy itself, proving that brains could beat brawn. Collectors today treat the 1965 GT350 like holy ground. Original models, especially untouched early builds, fetch hundreds of thousands of dollars at auction. One early production model sold for nearly $900,000 in recent years. But even more than their rarity, it's the story that keeps them alive, of how a small Texas hot rodder reshaped Detroit with a wrench and a will. This was the Mustang that proved you didn't need cubic inches to win, just purpose. And maybe a little Shelby madness. And just like that, the Mustang wasn't a secretary's car anymore. It was a weapon. And this was just the beginning of the madness that would define the decade. Thanks for riding with us through the wildest, fastest Ford Mustangs of the 1960s. These machines weren't just cars, they were icons forged in speed, sound, and Shelby-fueled insanity. If you enjoyed this adrenaline-charged journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Top 5 Muscle Cars, where legends never die and horsepower never sleeps. Drop a comment below and tell us, which of these 60S beasts would you take for one last blast down the quarter mile? Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you at the next green light.